Morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here, and I see Brian doing the schedule wisely put the compliance talks after the coffee, so I'm glad of that. And I'm also glad to see there's still plenty of people in the room, as generally it's a good opportunity to clear off and not fall asleep. But I'm going to do my best to make this a little bit interesting, because I've been asked to talk about compliance, and that's something I'm well used to doing. I'm the Director of Resilience, but I'm also the Director of Compliance for now in the NCSE. Just a free advertisement slot. We are advertising for a new director post in the NCSE for Director of Compliance, which will go live this Friday. So if there's any budding compliance executives that want to join the team here, your opportunity will present itself very soon. But I'm well used to talking about compliance. I'm basically the NCSE's Grim Reaper. I go around the place, going into companies and delivering the bad news about the various different EU regulations that they're now subject to. So Brian has asked me to make it a bit more positive today, so I'll do my best. So for those who aren't aware, if you've been living under a rock, you'll know that the European Union has been busy over the past number of years producing various different European regulations, and they cover various different areas. NIS2 would be the one people are probably most familiar with. It applies to critical infrastructure, so health, energy, transport, and so on, the typical sectors, as well as a whole range of new sectors. And there's a good chance if you work in a relatively large or medium-sized organisation, you may be in scope of that one. But there's a whole range of other ones that you may not be aware of. So there's the Cyber Security Act, which deals with cyber certification. There's the Cyber Solidarity Act, which is all about trying to build up a network of interconnected SOCs across Europe at a national level to share cyber threat intelligence, as well as creating what's known as the EU Cyber Reserve, so a large pool of trusted companies that can respond to large-scale incidents. There's also the terribly named ECCC regulation, so the European Cybersecurity Competence Centre regulation. And what that's about is trying to build up Europe's industry or research capacity or education and skills, so to level up cybersecurity so that we can respond to the ever-growing threats. And there's a whole load of vertical regulations focused on various different sectors like finance or aviation or electricity generation. But the one I want to focus on today is the EU Cyber Resilience Act, because in my view, this is the one that people know the least about, but it's the one that is potentially going to have the most impact and is going to present the greatest opportunity. And I was delighted to hear the talks this morning by Joe Tidy and Jenny. They're really, really interesting talks about the human factors and social engineering, and that's only right. 60% of attacks, according to ENISA, are as a result of social engineering or spear phishing or phishing and those entry vectors. But another area that's a massive concern is vulnerabilities. Depends on where you get your data, but ENISA say it's 23%. IBM, Verizon have it about somewhere between 20 and 25%, depending on the year. So it's about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 attacks as a result of vulnerabilities in products and services. And the truth is, the security of our products, well, frankly, it's a little bit shit. And that's a technical term, I promise. It's backed by science. We've done a lot of research on this. But it's the truth. And at times, like, not all products are shit, obviously. And not all shit products are shit all of the time. But they are quite a lot of the time. And it feels like our digital products have become one gigantic botnet. They're being used against us. Nation-state actors are using all of these shoddy pieces of equipment we have connected to our homes, our offices, our hospitals to obscure their attacks, using ORBs, as they're known, operational relay boxes. It makes them incredibly hard to track. Ransomware actors are using the products that are supposed to defend our organizations, like VPNs, like remote access, firewalls, and so on, as the entry point for their attacks. Mass exploitation once there's a 0-day or even an N-day vulnerability. DDoS attacks are on the rise every year. The largest ever DDoS attack happened in September. That record will undoubtedly be broken again before the end of the year. And it's because of the number of these devices, the low level of security they have, and how easy it is to exploit them. And it's causing chaos in our societies. Joe gave great examples of the massive impact that ransomware attacks are having in the UK, and it's the same in Ireland here. Booking systems, our passenger management systems in the airport were down for quite a while earlier last month as a result of a ransomware supply chain attack. So this is having a big issue. And why is the security of our products so poor in general? It's down to a few different things that we know about. So products are shipping with known vulnerabilities. So even after vulnerabilities are discovered, those vulnerabilities can remain in products and they continue to ship and go onto the market being vulnerable from day one. Security patches can be inconsistent if they're applied at all. There's kind of a race to the bottom in terms of trying to produce cheap kit with the mass amount of kit coming into our homes, into our lives, our businesses from online marketplaces. They're not being designed with secure by design principles. But what it ultimately comes down to is misaligned market incentives. So buyers and sellers, there's an information asymmetry. It's what's known as a market for lemons. So the buyers don't know what a good or secure product is. They don't have the right information, and therefore they can't make a decision. So it doesn't make sense to then produce a secure product. So there's this misaligned market incentive. Our colleagues in the UK said earlier this year that we know more about what goes into our sausages than what goes into our digital products. And for anyone who knows how a sausage is made, that's not necessarily very comforting. And we know how to fix these issues. We've been talking about it for at least a decade, or I've worked in this industry about that long, and that's how long I've heard this reframe where we say what we need to do is build our products so that they're secure by design and secure by default. And we've been talking about it a lot, about having threat modeling and risk assessments before you build a product, secure coding practices, that we have to have hardened architectures so that they can withstand attacks, that we're using memory safe languages so we don't have buffer overflow attacks, that we have supply chain assurance so that we know what goes into our products. We have these software bill of materials, as they're called, the ingredient list of what a product has. That we test the product before it goes in the market, that we do, vulnerability testing, fuzzing, that sort of thing, and that we're using cryptography to secure the data that's moving between these products. And then secure by default is something that's even easier to fix. Don't ship devices that have admin as the password and username, and that's a real issue. There was a water system, several water systems and heating systems here in Ireland which went down in the middle of winter actually. As a result of having those basic passwords, and a nation state actor exploited them. So it's having real impacts in the world here, and all of the other areas that in terms of having patching automatic where possible, there's signed updates and so on. So look, the message is we know how to fix these things, but it's not happening because the market doesn't reward those behaviors. So no matter how much we keep saying to each other, we must do secure by design, we must do secure by default, and the European Union recognised this. So back in 2021, when we were busy hunkered down in our lockdowns, they were looking at this issue, quietly working away. They produced a really great impact assessment on the cost of all of this, the impact it's having, how it's affecting our society and our economy. And the conclusion was they needed a new law. Obviously, that was the conclusion. That's a conclusion of every EU impact assessment. So the new law was the Cyber Resilience Act, and it had four main areas. Our four main outcomes we wanted to achieve. One was to obviously improve the security of our digital products and services. They recognised it's not where it should be. They wanted a coherent cybersecurity framework. So already individual countries and member states were moving ahead with their own laws. And what you don't want then is a patchwork of 27 different laws across the European Union and trying to comply with all of those. They wanted transparency about what goes into the products so people know what they're buying. And they wanted information to be given to consumers so that they can use their product safely. So what they effectively did is they're trying to apply product safety rules that we know work in other contexts. Every time you have a device, there's probably somewhere on this, maybe not, a CE mark that says this meets a certain standard and it can be sold in the EU. And they wanted to produce the same, a digital CE mark, to say that these products are cyber secure. So the Cyber Resilience Act introduced a whole load of new obligations for manufacturers who are putting these products on the market. The baseline cybersecurity requirements, there's 14 of them. They're pretty much what I talked about earlier on in the secure by design and secure by default. There is vulnerability handling and reporting. So every company has to have a CVD policy, a coordinated vulnerability disclosure policy, so that if a researcher comes along and says, hey, found this vulnerability in your product, there has to be a way to report that, and then that they deal with it. And that they have to report those vulnerabilities so that we can get a picture on what's going on. Because the truth is, at the moment, it's very, very difficult to understand the scale of this issue. There also is mandatory support periods. So it's no longer acceptable to put a product on the market and then say, that's your business. And if it's insecure, deal with it yourself. You have to support it through security updates for at least 5 years. And that's at least 5 years from when you sell the filing product. So if you have a product and you're selling it for 6 years, 5 years after that point, it has to be supported. And that, or the lifetime of the product, because, from visiting hospitals and energy sites around this country, there's a lot of antiquated equipment, so it has a much longer life. And if it's expected to have a 15, 20-year shelf life, that's how long it needs to be supported. And then obviously the transparency obligations, the software bill of materials. And then there has to be a way, obviously, to check all of this stuff, because there's no point just saying, trust me, bro, it's definitely secure. So what they do is they have, and this is a horizontal approach. So I've been talking a lot about digital products. I didn't really actually explain what I mean. It's everything. It's everything from your smartwatch to your connected doorbell to your to all of the products that are in our networks, firewalls, VPNs, antivirus, browsers, everything, hardware and software. So basically, it's hard to think of what's out of scope, really. If it connects to a network, it's in scope. There's some limited exclusions for defense and military, because obviously they can do whatever the hell they want. But there's a few other minor exclusions. One major one, SaaS products. So if it's basically just you logging into a SaaS platform through a browser, that's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about websites. It's talking about software products. And obviously, I talked a little bit about the reporting obligations. I won't dwell on this because it's very, very familiar territory. We're talking about the same things you would see in GDPR and NIS2. You're talking about an early warning within 24 hours, a full report then within 72 hours explaining what the issues are, and then after the patch or the mitigation is applied, a final report to an ESA. And there's a lot of nuance here, which you can get into a lot of detail about. What's an actively exploited vulnerability, what's a severe security incident, and so on. But there's the point is that there's reporting obligations. And then in terms of conformity assessment, so how is this all checked? It depends on risk. So a lot of the products pretty much most of the products will fall into this self-declaration category. So the company will go through various different processes to document and show that they've built the product securely, and then they'll declare that the product meets the requirements of the Cyber Resilience Act in the same way that most products have a CE mark, and that's based on the company building to a certain standard. But there are other kind of important and critical products that have higher levels of assurance, whereby what's known as a notified body, so that's essentially a third party, has to come and do an assessment, and there's different types of assessments in terms of applying harmonized standards or type approval, so saying every product that's in this range is certified, or that your quality assurance system and how you build the products. And then for the very, very high end, you have to have a European cyber security certification. I'll talk a little bit about this in a while. We're not going to go too in depth. The coffee may be wearing off. But how this works in practice, again, there's a lot of annexes in the law. So you can read the law, which by European standards, this is massive. It's still huge, but it's not like this big. But then there's the annexes, which contain a lot of the information. And that talks about how it's going to work, how products are assessed, what the requirements are, what a declaration of conformity looks like. We'll look at two of them just very quickly. The Annex 3 and Annex 4, which identifies critical products and important products. The important products there, I'm not going to read them out, and if you can read my slides, you might be able to read the back, but it's basically a laundry list of all of the products that we use on a daily basis to manage and secure our networks. They're all going to need that higher level of assurance. So the entry door where we're seeing the attackers get in. And then there's an even higher level of assurance. There's class 1 and class 2. So class 1 is mostly around has a slightly lesser assurance, and then class 2 is slightly higher. So that's the kind of infrastructure layer, sort of hypervisors and, important things like firewalls. And then you've an even higher layer, which is the critical products. And they're the ones that have to get a European certificate, once they're available. Their schemes aren't available yet, but they hope there will be by the time this comes into force. And that's for a very limited number of products. That list can change as well, so it may change over time. So look, how will this work in practice? So the law describes how this is supposed to work, but the law is written by lawyers, and lawyers don't build products, thank God. They're built by engineers, and engineers use standards. That's the language they speak in. So the European Union, the Commission, has sent a standardization request to all of the standards bodies in Europe saying, look, you need to translate what we've just said as a law into something that engineers can understand. And there's now 41 standards being developed across 3 European standards organizations in 9 different working groups. So this is a mammoth effort. And for anyone who knows how standardization works, it's a really slow and bureaucratic process. And in this case, it still is, but it's moving much, much faster than normal. This is kind of breakneck speed, but they hope to, I think if all going well, they should have these standards in place by about this time next year, when the obligations come into force for the most part in 2027. So you can see they're being reasonably transparent about this as well. So you can look at what the draft standards are at the moment. If you go onto the website of ETSI, for instance, on like what the horizontal standards are, so what the obligations are across all of the products, and then what the vertical standards are. So they have a standard for browsers, a standard for AV, a standard for firewalls. And then again, how is this going to work in reality? So once the standards are in place, then there's a whole ecosystem of bodies that are going to supervise and enforce on this. So I've already talked about what the Commission have done in setting the rules. The standards bodies are designing the standards. Then ENISA, the European Cybersecurity Agency, are going to be receiving all of these vulnerability reports. So there's going to be an obligation, as I spoke about, to report to them. They will automatically then be shared with the National Cybersecurity Centre in the member state where the company is based. That's going to be a lot coming to us in the NCSE, because most of the companies are based here. There's also, if the company has what are known as valid, say, cybersecurity concerns about reporting to the wider platform, they can report directly to the National Cybersecurity Centre. So we're expecting a lot of direct reports as well as the ones that will come through ENISA. And then there's the regulatory authorities. So there's the Market Surveillance Authority. So that's the body that's going to have the teeth. They're going to be looking at the market, seeing what products are compliant, what ones are not, and then they can recall products, they can issue fines and so on. It's yet to be determined who that will be in Ireland, but there are already authorities that deal with product security, so it might be one of them. And then there's the notified bodies, as I said, who will carry out the third-party assessments, and then you have to have a body that accredits that body. So that's what the notifying and accreditation authorities are. And then at the bottom layer, probably the most important, the ones who are going to have to build the products to these standards. And that's not just the manufacturers. There's also obligations on the importers and the distributors. So if you're selling software here in the European Union, this applies to you. So look, I realize I was supposed to talk about the opportunity here, and this isn't all bad news. There's a huge opportunity here, in my opinion. So for the cyber industry, for as many of you in the room are, if you're an independent contractor, if you're working for a consultant, if you're working in the cyber industry providing services, there's huge opportunity here to provide your expertise to these manufacturers. You're going to need your expertise, and this applies to everyone from the large software houses, the big tech firms, all the way down to, a 2-person operation in Leitrim making agri software. The people are going to need your help here. It's a great opportunity if you're on the defense side, because 1 in 5 attacks, or 1 in 4 attacks, depending on how you look at it, are coming from vulnerabilities. This will hopefully reduce that. You'll know that your product has been built by secure by design, secure by default principles. On the government side, we're happy about the job creation opportunities here, the opportunity to have more people working in this industry, but also the real goal here is to try and reduce that systemic risk. Our national cyber risk assessment is due to be published in the next couple of weeks, and this is a major issue, and we hope that this will help to reduce that risk. Then if you're working in the academic or university side, there's great funding opportunities already. So Horizon Europe and DEP, they're already providing a huge amount of funding towards innovative solutions that solve this problem. I should have mentioned on the industry side, if you're of the mind to set up a startup or scale up, there's a huge opportunity here across the European Union and indeed globally. But the real opportunity here, in my view, is about money. And that original impact assessment I talked about earlier that the European Union did, they estimated this is going to save somewhere between 180 billion, would it be, or 290 billion a year, every year. And obviously, that's a bit of an academic exercise, but even if a fraction of that was saved, it will outweigh the cost of implementing this system. And for those of you like myself who have difficulty visualizing big numbers, that's approximately 100 children's hospitals, depending on which day you do the cost. And I'd rather that we spent our money on that than on ransoms to cyber criminals. But the opportunity here in front of us is about trying to build trust in our digital ecosystem. Anybody who talks to people who are not in this industry, they don't trust the digital ecosystem. They don't think their products are secure. They're afraid of technology, and we want that to end. We also want to make sure that our hospitals, that our businesses, that our homes are secure and safe. But we also want to stop feeling that our products are gone from shit and that they're gone too secure. So thank you very much. I see my time's gone to 0. I actually don't have 4. I thought I had 3 minutes for it. Oh yeah, I can take one question. Yep. So, is your question with products now having AI built in that they're becoming more complex and more difficult to manage? Is that effect? Okay, so you're saying basically security patches will have AI built into them, and you might want to update, but you don't want to build AI into your product. Is that? Yeah, okay. Look, that's a complex question, obviously, and a very specific situation. But what I would say in the context of what I've just talked about, the Cyber Resilience Act, one of the key principles of it is it's trying to provide information to the business owner or the product owner. So you can no longer just provide updates without a clear transparency about what that update does, and also instructions to the user about how to use the product securely. So that's built in. Now, we're at the early stages of it, so I can't say that specific situation will be made better, but I know that the approach and what we're trying to do is to reduce that information asymmetry so that users can understand and use their products in a much more secure way. And that means making it easy to understand as well, not overloading them with technical information. I'll take one more, yeah.
Can I or?
Yeah.
Okay. So the question is about supply chain. Now, we can discuss about standards, etc., but I'm more interested in your perspective on the governability of the supply chain, because from where I stand, I see that one of the biggest issues, and honestly, I don't see any meaningful solution at this point.
Yeah.
Especially if you look at the fourth and fifth parties, etc.
Yeah. So it's a huge problem. Supply chain is one of the biggest issues. And what I would say about the Cyber Resilience Act is at least it's trying to address that issue. So, if you can at least know that, okay, well, this something that I'm bringing into my supply chain, whether it's a product or whether it's a code library or whatever else, that you know that it at least meets the standards of the Cyber Resilience Act. So it meets the 14 requirements. You may even say, okay, well, I want you to have your assessment done by a notified body so that you can be assured that somebody has looked at it and that it's secure, that there's the SBOMs, but there's a huge amount to be done in terms of practical implementation. So the law is about the principles, and now the standards are coming, but then there's going to have to be, like, how does this work in practice? Like, how do you actually map, as you say, down to third, fourth, fifth party? Because once you start, like, it becomes this massive spaghetti that's very, very difficult to understand. But I think I do honestly believe that the Cyber Resilience Act will force higher standards across the board, and should help to address some of those issues. Though I hope that somewhat addresses your question, even if it doesn't convince you. Okay, thank you very much.